Welcome back to the PT Graduate Podcast. My guest today is Coach Omar, all the way from Wellington, but normally Auckland, right?
That's right. Yeah. North
Nice.
Shore.
Yeah, nice. And we crossed paths at conference last year, Omar, and I was inviting people to join me. So it's great to have you on here. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, man. It's cool.
That's great. And so, Omar, tell us a little bit about what you do, and maybe sort of the lead in, how you got there, and so what inspired you to do what you do.
Yeah. So I'm a strength and conditioning coach. I basically work with athletes mostly in the rugby, football, and basketball space, and just recently transitioned into the combat sports space as well. Um, I did my diploma at Unitech, where they touched base on some strength and conditioning. And then from there, I just geeked out and just studied it like crazy myself. And yeah, became pretty well knowledge on it. And just to
Yeah.
the point where I can really help people develop those skills needed for their sport. And it's been going pretty good for the last 5 years now, almost 5 years.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Awesome. And so you're based on the North Shore. You're based near Glenfield?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Waterall Valley is
Oh,
my athletic facility that I train people in.
mm.
Otherwise, I've got another small conditioning gym that's really good for just high intensity conditioning and stuff, and that's in Waterall Valley as well, but just off a different street.
Okay. Okay. Well set up. So all sports people catered for.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I wish I could kind of put the smaller gym like in a bag and bring it into the bigger gym, but a little bit down the street,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah.
So what's the difference between those two facilities? Can you talk us through? Because I'm not strong in the S&C world. That's not an area I've played in much. So can you sort of explain the difference of those facilities?
Yeah, the two that I've got access to. So the first one is called Functional Fitness. It's a huge facility and
Mm.
honestly just a great overall 24/7 gym. But when I they have like a big old AstroTurf, so it's about 15 meters long, sleds that you have attachments for, three squat racks, lots of machines that are really diverse in terms of different certain amounts of pulls that you need to do. To be honest, even though I don't really use the machines that much, but they're there. So if I need
Yeah.
to isolate a certain muscle group or
Sure.
isolate or focus on a specific movement, I can play around with it and be a little bit dynamic with it as well.
Mm.
So big gym, lots of machines, lots of stuff that you can use, and lots of space, which is the main thing. So that's where I usually do our bounds, our sprints, and our athletic stuff without worrying about a ceiling over our head and stuff like so.
Uh,
Throwing a medicine ball
yeah.
up, etc. Whereas the other gym is basically it's called Uplift, so it's a small group fitness facility, and it's very cool. They've got that's where you've got your assault bikes, your rowers, your ski ergs, your medicine balls that are your dead balls, I should say, that are about like 20, 24, 30 kilos.
Jeez.
And yes, but unfortunately, the other functional fitness, they just don't have that heavy, those little things like ski
Mm.
ergs and big medicine balls. So
Mm.
yeah, it's a little bit of best of both worlds on those ones. So one's got a lot of space, lots of machines, but missing a couple of the bits of equipment that I would like to have there, like the heavy dead bulls and the ski erg and rowers downstairs and stuff. Whereas
Mm.
the other one is not a lot in space, but has those little things and a few squat racks as well.
Right. 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 Gotcha. Yeah, you painted a nice picture there. I like it. And so is that your background, Omar? Are you a rugby player or a footy player? Why are you sort of interested in those particular sports?
Well, actually, funnily enough, I grew up playing competitive basketball,
Ah,
and as I studied more and more into strength and conditioning, it wasn't necessarily like if you pick, say, for example, one sport, it's like, oh, I'm a this sport strength and conditioning coach. It's very limiting. Like
mm,
it's
mm,
at the end of the day, if you watch enough of the sport or you understand the person's role in the sport, they have to move laterally fast. They need to get off the mark quick and get into top speed fast. They need to, get down to the ground level, for example, like for a ruck. and then
Mm,
be able to get up quickly and use that power to go. So it's all force into the ground. It's all lateral movements. It's all running. So it's like,
mm.
man, if I can coach that, you know, what's the difference? I can train almost anyone. And
Sure.
the only reason why rugby really jumped out, it basically jumped out at me, it's just because it's so popular in this country. So
Yeah.
when I started saying like, yeah, I can train specifically in terms of like sprinting, jumping, all that sort of stuff. I just got approached by a lot of rugby players, and it kind of just blew up from there.
Right. Right. Right.
Sorry,
Nice.
just give me a second. I'm just going to close the window because someone's doing some weed whacking.
Ah, fair enough. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is a Saturday after all, right? So,
Yeah,
some of
talk
the
about timing.
yeah, no, no, it's all good. Some of the weekday stuff isn't it's not quite the same.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
All good. I see. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, rugby is a religion in New Zealand, so there's going to be a rugby club on every corner, a bit like a golf club on every corner, sort of arrangement. So it makes sense that that's your yeah. There's a lot of people in that space that probably need some help and some support. But you're
Yeah.
right. It does cross over, right? There's some commonalities with some of those other sports, but I suppose the one that I sort of would scratch my head a little bit on is the whole combat side of things. So. Would that be wrestling or some of the other arts?
Yeah, so it's I've got right now I'm working with one mixed martial artist. And I had to kind of make it clear. I'm like, hey, just bear in mind, like I boxed when I was 16, so I understand very, very basic stuff of fighting.
Sure.
But I told him, I'm like, "Wait, time out, like what do you need work on?" And he just goes, "Oh, I just need to get stronger in my legs, and I need my legs more conditioned." All the other boxing stuff, like the conditioning in terms of like his anaerobic fitness and his aerobic fitness and stuff, the
Mm,
MMA gym takes care of it. So
mm,
he just said, like, I just want you to help me with the lifting side of getting stronger in the
mm,
legs,
mm.
producing more force, but also just making sure that I stay mobile so I don't like stiffen up on in the ring or in the cage or anything like that. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I can do that, you know? And so we've been working together. He's got a fight coming up in Bali at the end of February. Shout out to Jesse Thug Taylor. He's awesome. His
Nice.
kid's hungry, so he's doing good. And
Nice.
then same thing with the boxer I'm working with, Nick the Greek. Shout out to him as well. He's awesome. He works hard and he's got no excuses, so he goes really good. But he's same thing. I just asked him, I'm like, what do you need work on? He's like, man, I need help with dropping weight. He doesn't have like that kind of guidance. So dropping a
Hmm.
bit of weight, conditioning,
Mm.
and just overall putting a little bit more of we're working on a little bit of force development and conditioning in general for his punches. So kind of giving him that sort of stimulus.
Yeah.
And when he just told me exactly what he wants, I'm like, well, it's not rocket science. I've trained it before. You got two arms, two legs, and a heart
Yeah.
that beats. I can train you, So, and it's been going well so far. He's been getting stronger. He's been
Nice.
getting, he doesn't, he finishes his conditioning sets, so it's been working well.
Nice. Good work. That name, Nick the Greek, rings a bell.
Yeah, he's a very very strong fighter. So I think I believe about 3 years ago he had a fight for the title against Jayo Pataya. Yeah, and they went the whole 10 rounds. So that's impressive in itself. And
Yeah.
he's got a big fighting spirit in him, and he's had a few fights. He's worked out of Shane Cameron's gym as well.
Ah.
Yeah, so no, he's definitely a well-known name from what I've
Yeah.
realized. I've realized that whenever I put up a post on Instagram, I'll get maybe 30 or 40 likes maximum. I put up his one, I got over 100. I was like, all right, cool. People know him. People know him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's definitely a known name. I couldn't place it, but I just knew the name. It's one of those ones that sticks, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So when you're looking at conditioning legs, are you going squats or are you doing single leg work or are you doing a combination?
Single leg work is very important for fighters, especially when it comes to MMA, because they have to be able to have some form of balance on one foot at a time. So
Oh
we
yeah.
mobilize with single leg stuff. We prioritize single leg stuff in the beginning in terms of like whether it be lunges or big bounds and landing on the one leg, etc.
Mm,
But in reality, most of your fighting, unless you're doing like a step back straight, is going to be very anterior based. So it's really just the anterior chain. So really a
sure.
lot of quad work, which comes down to a lot of running and minimal rest. We do things like metabolic conditioning training, which focuses on not only just high efforts, but also minimal rest in between so that it basically teaches you to recover quickly between
Yeah.
rounds.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I guess really between them as well, I obviously won't say what it is, but like there's a couple of body parts that we're kind of like nursing, just making sure that we don't really aggravate certain parts of the body.
Sure.
So for some cases, we can't do certain things. So
Hmm.
keeps me on my toes, keeps me playing around with, what
Hmm.
sort of modules and protocols we have to do in order to get them conditioned. But
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
makes the job even funner and more worthwhile.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. As you say, it keeps you on your toes, and we kind of have to do that every day, don't we? We have to adapt to
Absolutely.
what's in front of us.
That's what
Um,
we love. Yeah.
yeah. So are their rounds 3 minutes?
The training
Uh,
module.
when they're fighting, is it a 3 minute round?
Um, Yeah, the MMA one I haven't actually figured out yet because
Hmm.
this fight's going to be in Bali, so I don't know if their tournament has a different timer and stuff.
Right.
But the kid is well conditioned anyway, so we're just
Yeah.
like I said, we're leaving that for the MMA gym for the conditioning. I'm just working on force
Hmm.
development for him.
Sure.
For Nick, however, I believe it's he was doing 3 minute rounds, so I think it is still going to be the same.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so I guess we're just going for
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
still week 2 with him, so it's basically just getting a nice base level of conditioning first, and then
Yeah.
we're going to build it up to be more sports specific. But I'm trying to kind of get him not too much in his head about it. So
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, but the rounds are this much." I'm like, "Doesn't matter. Let's
Hmm.
get a strong base,
Hmm.
and then we build up, and then as we go closer and we start tapering into that fight time, then we can be very specific with." Don't give up, 20 seconds to go, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense. Interesting. And so just going back to the geeking out part, you said that you got your some quals and the usual certificates, but then you sort of went down this rabbit hole of learning much more about the S&C world. How where did you do that? How did you do that?
So there's a place, not a place. There's a channel called Overtime Athletes that he's Chris Barnard. He
Hmm.
really explains specifically how he goes about his S&C sessions.
Hmm.
Along with that, just reading a few journal articles um, of things that I've kind of looked into, like in terms of like contrast training. And then I look into things like, when to use contrast training, why to use contrast training, why would you use contrast training over French contrast training, and then
Hmm.
basically just keep going into more and more different rabbit holes. I am also doing the ISSA. What's it called? I think that's the acronym. Yeah, the ISSA Strength and Conditioning module online.
Yeah.
Um, and it's nice and reassuring that I'm still seeing a couple of things in there that I'm learning. But it's nice and reassuring to know that what I have researched myself and I'm looking into, it's they're confirming it. So I'm like, it's quite nice. But other than that, no, just we touched a lot on strength and conditioning in Unitech as well, but just not as much as I would have liked to. So I'm just basically taking what I've learned from Unitech and going into more specific routes and figuring out, okay, they talked about this being a good tool for power development, but would you do it in season or would you do it off season or would you do it in the preseason or like why would you avoid it in the
Yeah.
peaking phase, things like that.
Hmm.
um, and then of course as soon as someone approaches you and they're from a different sport, that sometimes gets flipped completely, so you're like, okay, now would you do it for them at this off season, and then you start to figure out how diverse it has to be basically. So yeah, ISSA, Unitech,
Hmm.
and journal articles, and just I've got a few different books from like Eric Helm and all that sort of stuff. I know those
Yes.
guys who are just
Yes.
amazing to read. So
Yeah.
yeah, continuously just learning and learning.
Mm. Mm. It's quite a lot. It's quite a lot. I guess when you're passionate about a subject, though, you just keep digging, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hey, if you love it, it's doesn't feel like a chore, so it's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm curious about that sort of that on off season. Now, obviously, that's something you talk about on your socials. Is that on off season training? Are you busier in the off season as opposed to the on season, or how does that play out?
Um, so preseason for rugby, I'm definitely busier.
Okay.
Um, I'm doing my best to try get this club to get their players lifting in season with me. So meeting me at the big facility, like I told them, I don't care if it's like 15 people that show up
Mm,
in the gym, just bring them
mm,
in.
mm.
I can split them up. I'll be like, hey,
Yeah.
forwards and locks over here, backs and wingers over here. We're gonna do
Mm,
this. We're gonna do this
mm,
here. Then you guys are gonna swap. When
mm.
you go to the second phase, you don't go as heavy, etc., because that's not what you're working on. And
Yeah.
then after that, going into the field. But reality is I am busier in the off season, so the summertime minus December, because everyone just switches
Yeah.
off in December, which did my head in a little bit. But I was like, I was like,
It's a long season, right? There's not a lot of downtime.
yeah, absolutely. But no, those who understand how important it is to lift in season,
Mm,
I get busy with them in the winter time.
mm,
But otherwise, yeah, most of the time it's like your October, November, and then January, February, sometimes March is pretty full on. I think
mm, mm,
in the last, so not this week that went by, but 3 weeks before that, I clocked close to about 200 hours of work. In between, training people, driving to different like facilities, and
mm.
I've got a casual gig at like a certain gym as well. So sometimes I just sit, get paid to exist there and be on a computer, but
Yeah.
like helps with my programming and
Mm,
studying more and all that sort of stuff. But yeah,
mm,
altogether, I think yeah, that's how crazy January can be sometimes.
mm.
So Wellington was definitely well needed.
I was going to say, yeah, yeah, a well-deserved break. That's some pretty chunky time. I suspect it's a slightly different regime to your everyday person, right? Theirs is switch off in January and lie on the beach, but it's completely the opposite for you.
Yeah, yeah. And my one was I'm like switch off in December, which I
Yeah.
didn't want to do, but hey, like when a few of your athletes get out of Auckland and like, oh, this gym is closed. Oh, by the way, this group fitness gym is closed as well. And I'm just like, what do I do? you know, just keep studying, keep learning because I just sit at home on my computer or, just do some
Yeah.
more training for myself. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a good question, and I think it's a good follow on is how you look after yourself and what sort of things you do. Because obviously you're passionate about the subject and you're into the learning side of things. But
yeah,
does that leave much time for the self care and the looking after the business owner?
yeah. So my normal regiment of training at least 5 times a week became 4 times. And
Mm.
instead of it being like an hour to 2 hours in the gym, and bear in mind, when I'm 2 hours in the gym, I don't go crazy like for two
Yeah,
hours. There's like a little bit
yeah,
of chatting here and there,
yeah.
but that turned into like a solid like 20 to 30 minutes. Leave me alone. I'm just going to thrash myself doing some form of like a CrossFit module because they're
Mm,
pretty good
mm,
at, like, what are those ones like Isabel or Grace or whatever, where you're just doing nonstop power
mm,
cleans and then running and all that sort of stuff. So I'll do that and completely thrash myself. And then I feel like I've done something for
mm,
myself. Um, yeah. And then on the rare occasion that, someone cancels, I've got in Birkenhead, there's a, recovery, like a private recovery place in BFT Birkenhead that the owner
mm.
set up. So shout out to Greg for that. So he's
Yeah,
got a little recovery room with like an ice bath and a couple of saunas and stuff. So
yeah.
I'm trying my best that when someone cancels it, I'm like, okay, you got 3 hours to yourself. Go there and just take my recovery a little bit more serious, because that's what I need to
Mm.
get better at. I need to get better at practicing what I preach on that one. But yeah, so not a lot of time to for myself, but when I do, I definitely take advantage of it.
Good on you. Good on you. And I guess putting yourself through that stuff is always a good reality check, right? Because then you know how it feels and you know what you're dishing out.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you don't want to you want to be able to do everything you're telling your athletes and your clients to do
Mm,
because then you should know exactly how they feel and it
mm,
gives you a better understanding of when to pull it back for them. Coming more. When to pull it back for them or when to push it out.
mm.
And it's yeah, you don't want to be that person who just makes people do everything and you don't know what it feels like or whatever. You're like, "Oh, I read this in a book. Cool, bro." You want to actually put yourself through it a little bit just to be like,
Yeah.
wow, that sucked. He'll like this, but he needs
Yeah.
this. You know what I mean? Or she needs this. So yeah.
Totally. Yeah. 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 And so talking about that recovery in a bit more detail, obviously that's that's where the growth comes, that's where the repair comes. Do you have sort of some protocols for different sports, or does it depend on the individual in terms of the regime you recommend that they do outside of the gym?
No, not really. Just I mean, different mobility protocols. So like,
Mm,
with the MMA and the boxer, I'm focusing more on hip stuff.
mm,
To be honest, with the rugby players as well, lots of hip stuff as well. But
yeah,
um, yeah, it's just really just mobilize. I think it's kind of made that side of my job easy because a few of them have been pretty tight in the same areas anyway. So I'm just like,
right.
okay, rinse and repeat the same thing. Rugby players traps a lot more, to be honest. Like, so there's a few things that I do for that instead. And then when I train some of my general population people, it's just, hey, my hammies are tight. Okay, let's go through
Mm,
this hammy stretch and things like that. But really, same recovery, like rest more,
mm,
some sleep, get some good calories in.
mm,
From my experience, they don't eat enough anyway
mm.
because they don't want to
Okay.
get fat.
Ah,
But I'm like, hey, you gotta you're taking the calories in. It's only gonna do what you put your energy into. So you know what I mean? Things like that. So
mm,
it's a
mm.
bit of education to it, but really no. In terms of like big shifts in how they recover, not really.
Yep. Yep. And do you, the obvious one on my mind is things like creatine. Do you recommend for those athletes to be looking after themselves with things like creatine, obviously in an increased protein profile if they're very active, all those sorts of things to maximize
Yeah.
that nutrition?
Like so, here's my thing: is that I creatine is probably the only supplement that I would really, really recommend.
Mm,
However, I don't preach about it. So, like,
sure.
if somebody asks me about, like, oh, what's creatine like? I'm like, oh man, it's awesome, and I tell them all the benefits and all that sort
Mm,
of stuff. But in reality, because I'm not a nutritionist or a dietitian, I don't
sure.
even like to enter that space of like, you should put this in your body.
Sure. Sure.
You know what I mean? I'm just like, hey, try it, see how it feels. If
Mm,
it's things that are obvious, like, oh man, I don't feel great. Well, what did you have last night? Three cheeseburgers. I'm like, okay, don't do that. Like
yeah.
obvious things I can weigh in on. But when they're like, oh, what should I eat? That's like really, I was like, okay, we'll have some fruit here and there. Like,
Mm, mm,
just try these things out. Oh, but this makes me feel like this. What if I try this? I'm like, dude, I'm not a nutritionist. I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not necessarily something that I preach. If someone I had one of my athletes ask me about protein powder, I'm like, give it a shot. Like, are you eating enough protein? No, not really. Hey, try it out, see if it makes a difference. It's gonna,
Mm,
more protein's good in that case, but I'm not gonna yell at you if you don't have it. Let's put it that way.
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, absolutely. When it comes to creatine, though, it's good. I just don't really preach about it. I just, when they're in the gym with me, we focus.
Mm,
Anything outside the gym, hey,
yep.
you got to take care of that. And
Yep.
I'll help you with some advice if I know some stuff. If I don't know some stuff, you got to pull your socks up and research it yourself as well.
Sure. Sure. Staying in your lane, which is good, right? Scope of
Yeah.
practice and all that. So do you work with nutritionists if there are athletes that need to make weight and it's quite important?
Yeah, so I've not necessarily. There's a girl that I know named Sarah Boyd. She's a
Mm,
sports nutritionist, so she's very intelligent with what she does. I will sometimes ask for her advice if there's
yeah.
something I don't know much about, but
Mm,
I mostly just try and push people her way just to be like, because she's got to make money. So I was just like, yeah,
yeah.
talk to her as well.
Yeah.
But again, like when it comes to the MMA side of things, they've got the kid. He's got a whole team behind him
Uh,
who are so experienced in dropping weight and all that sort of stuff. He's actually trying to maintain it or lift up a little bit. And it's quite nice to see that we've been doing some sub maximal lifting, which is increasing his strength slightly, but he's
mm,
not gaining any weight, which is great.
mm, mm,
As for the other one, the Nick the Greek, the boxer,
mm, mm.
we are trying to drop weight a little bit, but I'm making it very clear to him. I'm like, man, I could run you ragged every day of the week, but it's not going to change unless we focus on what you eat. So he's
Yeah.
doing that.
Oh,
We'll see how he goes because it's only week 2. And
mm,
since we've
mm.
been doing a lot of lifting as well, there has been some muscle fiber density being created. So mm, possibly that might be the reason why he's not seeing a shift in the weight. But again, still too early of the day. maybe around week 3 or week 4, if it doesn't change, then I'll be like, all right, cool, man. What have you really been eating? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And then we
yeah,
kind of work through that way. But again, he's been in the game since he was about 10 years old, so he knows what to do to lose weight. So I'm kind of leaving that to him.
yeah.
I'm just working on his performance attributes of being able to keep
Mm.
up, stay on his feet, and run and keep his endurance and his conditioning up, basically.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. No, I like it. It's fascinating, interesting world. So about this time, Omar, is when I start to pick your brains on tips. So what are the things that have worked for you in what you do? Could be personal tips, could be business tips, whatever. These the things that listeners will want to hang on for and listen, find out about.
Yeah. So personal tip is if you love this, geek out, try to be as educated as you can on it because that's where you're going to set yourself apart from people. Business tip, just remembering for those who are in the same space that you are in the service business and
Mhm.
it's a privilege to serve. It's a privilege to make a difference to someone else's life, whether it's just general population, muscle fat, lose weight, or it's someone that really wants to grow in their sport. It's a privilege. And be ready to do free work because no, you're a nobody until you work hard and make a difference for people, and then you're somebody, and then that's when the money comes. But if you keep trying to ask for money from the get-go, chances are you'll have more people running away. So be ready to wake up early, be ready to sleep late, and be ready to do some work for free. And again, be ready to work hard.
I like it. I like it. And it's probably the first time I've heard that put that way. Like there's some similarities with people's top tips. There's the the softer skills, which are always really important, but nobody's ever said that so clearly before. And I think you're absolutely right. We need to earn the right and earn the respect of our clients and our audience, whoever it is we're talking to, before we have got to a point of asking for the money, for what it is that keeps the business rolling.
Absolutely, absolutely. You got to show that you know what you're talking about, and
Mm,
it goes down to that saying is that nobody cares about what you know until they know how much you care. So if you show them, hey, I care about your performance, and you show in day in and day out, and they're like, oh my God, this guy's been here with me for
mm,
like 3 weeks, 2 sessions, 3 sessions a week for the last 3 weeks, and he's asked for nothing.
mm,
And if that at that point you keep showing up and you keep staying relevant and you keep making a difference to them, then like honestly, Rich, I've tried to post on Instagram. I've tried to like, oh, I mean, I'm posting on Instagram now, but I've tried to like advertise on Instagram and like
mm,
pay
mm.
for advertisement and stuff. And I think when I tried to do it on Facebook and stuff, I got like one like from a stranger and that was it. Literally everything I'm getting now is just word of mouth.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
way you conduct yourself in front of people, the way you show yourself in a professional level and you show your education and you start making a difference to people
Mm,
in terms of their performance or how they feel or and or everything all together,
mm.
you get people talking, man, you're set.
Yeah.
You only need, I mean, let's be honest, if you got if you manage to get 5 clients who trust you and you get them 3 times a week, that's
Mm,
15 sessions a week. You're
yeah.
pretty much booked up. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
if you start to slack, they'll notice and they drop off just as fast. So
Yeah.
stay professional, keep caring, keep pushing. And again, sometimes that's going to require you to wake up super early. Sometimes it's going to require you to be home at 8:30 at night and then wake up super early, but
Yeah.
that's the game.
Yeah. 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 You're absolutely right. And I think that's a great reality check for people. So before we sign off, Omar, any question I didn't ask that I should have done?
Oh man, I don't know. I wasn't thinking about that. No, no. To be honest, I don't really. I didn't come in here with thinking like, oh, I hope you asked me this question. So no, I'm happy as man. Thanks so much for having me, Rich. I
Awesome.
appreciate it, man.
No, no problem. I just thank you for your time, especially on a weekend. It's much appreciated, and it will certainly add some great value to the podcast and what people are picking up from it.
No, no worries, man. It's
Awesome.
quite nice timing because now everyone's waking up. So
Ah,
I'm like, I always wake up early anyways. So I just woke up and I'm like, what do I do? Saturday morning,
yeah.
Rich, hit me up, you know?
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your break. Have a great weekend.
I appreciate it, Rich. You too.
Cheers,
Cheers,
Omar.
man.
See you, mate.